This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.
A continued delay in releasing the rebased CPI by the National Bureau of Statistics (NBS) could lead to a second postponement of the Central Bank's Monetary Policy Committee (MPC) meeting. The Central Bank of Nigeria (CBN) had postponed the first MPC meeting, citing the unavailability of updated inflation data. The National Bureau of Statistics has been unable to publish updated data following a cyber attack that took over its official website. Now, what could this mean for the economy is the question this morning, and joining us to speak on it is economist Adegboyega Adebajo. Good morning, sir, and thank you for joining us on the conversation.
Good morning. Pleasure,
as always. What is your reaction to the news of a possible postponement of the MPC?
Well, it's interesting. I think the news really isn't about the postponement of the MPC, but the delay in the NBS in, releasing the CPI figures or the latest figures actually based on their research. That's pretty much indicative that prices may not have been as stable between December and January. One thing is there needs to be a cutoff date in rebasing the CPI, rebasing the economy, and my guess is it's about December 2024, because that's important, and that's why the idea was to start from January with the MPC setting the pace based on those figures. But I think for businesses, and that's the most important implication here, because the MPC sets the pace in terms of the monetary policy, and that affects banks and ultimately affects businesses. So the key thing here for businesses is, are we going to have stable figures this year? Is inflation going to be relatively stable? And what exactly is going to happen to the exchange rate as we go along? The signs with the exchange rate are actually good so far, but everyone's a bit unsure about the inflation rate because we've seen an uptick in prices January to February. For the MPC, this delay perhaps is a good thing in the sense that they want to be pretty certain that they have all the parameters to take a decision. For us, I just think it's about stability. So January to March, we've been operating based on the policy, or we will be operating based on the policy up to March of the December decision of the MPC, and that's pretty fair for companies.
I do wonder, Mr. Adebajo, whether there are whether there's a possible negative impact of a delay till March, especially because if the NBS has delayed releasing the latest data based on the latest method of calculation, there's a big question on whether investors, industries across the country, the level of trust they would place in those figures, the outcome.
Okay, so that's the interesting perspective, because with every move, every decision, there are pros and cons, and that brings about the cons. One, there's uncertainty, and two, there's about trusting the figures. This impacts planning, not just for our industries and companies here, but also from the perspective of the foreign investors who are looking into the country and either planning to invest or increase their investment in the country. Most of these organizations would have done some sort of strategic planning in December or early January. But the key thing here is the figures, the policy to ensure that the plans that have been made are workable throughout the year are not available. And that's the key negative impact of this, which we all should be mindful of.
This begs the question of what the cutoff should be, because as you rightly noted, the real issue is actually the NBS, and I've not seen any sort of information. I've not seen anything that indicates that there might be some pressure on the NBS to try to release this critical information. They've missed one deadline. We're well into February. By the end of this week, we're hitting what is half of the month already. Can the CBN, the MPC, continue to use the non-release of the figures as a reason to keep shifting it down the line?
Well, okay, so that's an interesting thing. If there's no MPC meeting, it simply means the existing policy remains constant. So you could have a situation where there's an MPC meeting and the decision is we hold all the parameters constant, we're not changing MPR, and everything stays the same. And so it's just one meeting saying, okay, everything's okay. But if there's something pretty much important to consider, and it's really unfair that at this time of a new year, February 2025, we're unable to see figures covering the entire 2024. Yes, we have the inflation figures for December 2024, which is a good thing, really. And it sort of meets the expectations. But you said something else that's pertinent. The role of the NBS in providing the data to guide decision making, not just for the NPC, but for a lot of other organizations in the country. And I believe it's important to start to strengthen that organization because we shouldn't wait for 2 weeks more than the end of the month to be able to get the data for the month that just ended. It's very, very important. And if you recall, a year or so ago, when the NBC changed the formula for which it calculates unemployment, there was a hue and cry. A lot of people did not agree with that basis. And then we started having questions as to trust, which you said earlier, and again, uncertainty in terms of what these statistics would look like.
Right. Well, Mr. Adebajo, thank you very much for your time and your expertise on the conversation. Adegoyega Adebajo is an economist who joined us this morning on Now Breakfast to speak about the possible delay in the second MPC meeting of the year. The MPC meeting hasn't held so far. The first one was postponed because the National Bureau of Statistics delayed the release of the rebased CPI, and this is being discussed as the possible reason for the second postponement of the Central Bank of Nigeria's Monetary Policy Committee meeting.
This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.